The morning had started normally enough. I'd driven across town with my 8-year-old son to attend my nephew's birthday party at my sister's house. The sprawling 2-story home sat in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked professionally maintained and every driveway held at least 2 expensive cars. My son had been excited all week. He'd used his allowance to buy a remote control car for his cousin, wrapping it carefully with tape applied in overlapping strips. The gift sat on his lap during the entire drive, his small hands protectively covering the bright blue paper. We parked on the street because the driveway was already full. My brother's SUV, my parents' sedan, and my sister's husband's truck took up every available space. I held my son's hand as we walked up the pristine sidewalk, noticing how he tried to step over the cracks. My sister answered the door wearing a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was bright and welcoming, until her eyes dropped to my son's sneakers. They were new, purchased just last week from a discount store, but they weren't the brand-name shoes my nephew wore. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Everyone's in the backyard. The house smelled like expensive candles and fresh paint. We walked through the living room where furniture I recognized from a high-end catalog sat arranged in perfect symmetry. Family photos lined the walls, professional shots taken at studios with coordinated outfits and artificial backgrounds. In the backyard, colorful decorations hung from every available surface. A bounce house dominated one corner of the lawn. Tables covered with themed tablecloths held more food than 20 people could eat. My nephew ran past us, followed by 3 other children, all wearing matching party hats. My son's grip on my hand tightened slightly. He wasn't used to parties like this. Our birthday celebrations involved homemade cake and games in our small living room, maybe a trip to the park if the weather cooperated. "Hey buddy," my brother called out, walking over with a beer in hand. He ruffled my son's hair. "Ready to jump in that bounce house?" My son nodded, his shyness evident in the way he pressed closer to my leg. "Go ahead," I encouraged him. "Have fun." He hesitated for another moment before running off to join the other children, the wrapped gift still clutched in his hands. I made my way to where my parents sat at one of the tables. Dad was eating a plate of barbecue and Mom was watching the children with that expression grandparents get when all their grandchildren are in one place. "Glad you could make it," Dad said. "Traffic okay?" "Fine. Took the back roads." My sister appeared beside the table, holding a tray of drinks. "I wasn't sure you'd come. It's such a long drive from your place." There was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis on your place, that made my shoulders tense. "It's not that far," I replied evenly. "Well, some people don't mind the commute from those apartment complexes." She set the tray down with a slight clatter. "Michael and I couldn't imagine raising kids without a yard. Children need space to grow, don't you think?" Mom's expression shifted slightly, a warning look my sister either didn't notice or chose to ignore. "Different situations work for different people," I said, keeping my voice neutral. My sister's husband joined us, carrying a platter of burgers fresh from the grill. "Who wants to eat?" he announced cheerfully, oblivious to the tension. The next hour passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful conversation. I watched my son play with the other children, noticing how he held back slightly, not quite fitting into their easy camaraderie. They talked about video games he didn't have and vacation destinations he'd never visited. When it came time for cake, everyone gathered around the large patio table. My nephew sat at the head, a crown perched on his head, grinning at the attention. The cake was a professional creation, 3 tiers decorated with intricate designs that must have cost a fortune. My son stood near the edge of the group, still holding his wrapped gift. He'd been carrying it around for the past hour, waiting for the right moment to present it. My sister began organizing the gift opening, creating a designated area where my nephew could sit and display each present for photos. She assigned my brother's wife to write down who gave what, presumably for thank you notes later. One by one the gifts were opened. Electronics. Expensive toys. Gift cards to stores I rarely shopped at. Each present was met with enthusiastic reactions and immediate photo documentation. My son finally stepped forward when there were only a few gifts left, holding out his carefully wrapped package. The blue paper suddenly looked cheap under the afternoon sun, the tape visible and excessive. My nephew tore into it with the same enthusiasm he'd shown for all the others. The remote control car tumbled out, modest compared to the other toys, but chosen with genuine care. Cool, thanks, my nephew said, setting it aside to reach for the next present. My sister glanced at the car, then at my son, then at me. Something flickered across her face, an expression I'd seen before but never quite this pronounced. She walked over to where my son stood, her cream sweater bright against the darkening sky. The party was winding down and some families had already started gathering their things. That's when she looked down at my son and delivered the line that would change everything. You know, she said, her voice carrying across the patio, real family members don't live in apartments. The conversation around us died. My brother stopped mid-sentence. Mom's hand froze holding a paper plate. Dad's expression darkened. My son looked up at her, confusion evident on his young face. Then he looked down at his new shoes, the ones I'd been so proud to buy him, and I watched something shift in his eyes. My sister smirked, satisfied with whatever point she thought she'd made. The anger that rose in my chest was white-hot and immediate. For 3 years I kept quiet. For 3 years I'd maintained the facade, playing the role of the struggling younger brother while making sure my sister never missed a mortgage payment. When their housing market had crashed and their adjustable-rate mortgage had ballooned to unmanageable levels, when the bank had started foreclosure proceedings, who had they called? Not our parents, already retired on a fixed income. Not our brother, who had his own family expenses. They called me. Late at night, my sister's voice shaking with tears, begging for help. Just until they got back on their feet, she'd promised. Just until Michael's commission checks started coming in regularly again. Just temporary. I'd refinanced my own modest condo. I'd taken on extra consulting projects. I'd worked weekends and holidays, all while maintaining the illusion that I was the family member who couldn't quite get ahead. Every month for 36 months I'd transferred money to their mortgage company, not to them directly because I knew that would complicate things, but straight to the bank. They'd made the payments in their name, preserving their credit, protecting their home and keeping up appearances. And now she stood in that home, in the backyard I'd helped her keep, mocking my son for living in an apartment. I walked over slowly, watching her smirk widen as I approached. She thought I was going to slink away embarrassed. She thought she'd won whatever competition existed only in her mind. My son still hadn't moved, his small hand touching his new shoes as if to verify they were real, as if to understand what made them insufficient. I stopped directly in front of my sister, close enough that only she, my son, and my parents could hear clearly. Real family members, I said quietly, don't need their brother paying their mortgage. Her smirk vanished. The color drained from her face so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What? She whispered. You heard me. My brother-in-law approached, sensing something had shifted. What's going on? My sister's mouth opened and closed without sound. She looked at Mom, at Dad, searching for denial or rescue. Mom's face held a mixture of shock and something else. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition that something irreparable had just broken. Please, Mom whispered, reaching out a hand. Please, not here. I smiled then, not with warmth but with the release of 3 years of careful silence. Not here. I repeated. Where then, Mom? When would be a good time to mention that I've been paying $3,200 every month to keep this house out of foreclosure? Should I have brought it up during Christmas dinner? Or maybe at Easter brunch? My brother moved closer, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding. You've been paying their mortgage? For 3 years, I confirmed. Since their rate adjusted and they couldn't make the payments anymore. My sister finally found her voice. You said you wouldn't tell anyone. You promised. That was before you decided to humiliate my son at a birthday party. My brother-in-law's face had gone red. Whether from embarrassment or anger I couldn't tell. We were going to pay you back. We just needed time to stabilize. 36 months, I said. That's $115,000. When exactly were you planning to stabilize? The number hung in the air, concrete and undeniable. Other family members had stopped pretending not to listen. The children still played, oblivious, but every adult on that patio was watching us now. My sister's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears, not sorry ones. You can't just announce that in front of everyone. You're destroying us. I'm destroying you? The laugh that escaped me was sharp. You just told my son he's not real family because we live in an apartment. An apartment I live in because I emptied my savings to keep your house. Dad stood up from his chair, his expression harder than I'd seen in years. Is this true? You've been paying their mortgage for 3 years. Every month. Direct deposit to the mortgage company. He turned to my sister. You told us you'd worked it out with the bank. You said they'd modified your loan. She couldn't meet his eyes. We did work it out. We just needed help making the payments. Help. Dad's voice rose slightly. That's not help. That's him paying for your house while you pretend everything's fine. We were going to pay him back, my brother-in-law repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to him. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone I barely recognized. When you called me 3 years ago crying, begging for help, I said yes because you're my sister. I said yes because family helps family. I said yes even though it meant I couldn't buy a house of my own, couldn't save for my son's education, couldn't do a lot of things. We didn't ask you to sacrifice everything, she said, her voice breaking. No, you just asked me to save your house. And then you forgot I did it. You forgot it so completely that you could stand here in a home I'm paying for and mock my son for where we live. Mom was crying now, silent tears she wiped away with trembling hands. My brother stood with his arms crossed, looking at my sister with an expression I'd never seen him wear before. The party was effectively over. Families were gathering their children, making excuses about early mornings and long drives. My nephew sat abandoned among his pile of gifts, the remote control car visible near the bottom. I took my son's hand. We're leaving. Wait, my sister said, reaching out. We need to talk about this. No, we really don't. You made your position clear. Real family members don't live in apartments. Well, real family members also don't pretend to own houses their brother is paying for. What are you saying? Her voice had gone small, frightened. I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app. With a few taps, I canceled the automatic transfer I'd set up 36 months ago. I'm saying I'm done. The next mortgage payment is all yours. The color that had drained from her face earlier didn't return. You can't. We can't afford it without you. The payment is $4,000. Then I guess you'll need to figure something out. Sell the house, refinance again, get second jobs. Not my problem anymore. My brother-in-law took a step toward me. Be reasonable. We have a family. We have kids. So do I said, squeezing my son's hand. And he just learned that his aunt thinks he's not real family because of where we live. That's worth more to me than your mortgage. I started walking toward the gate, my son keeping pace beside me. Behind us, voices rose in argument. My sister was crying loudly now. My brother-in-law was angry. Dad was demanding answers. Mom was trying to calm everyone down. We reached my car and I helped my son into his seat. His face was thoughtful, processing everything he'd heard. Dad? He said as I started the engine. Yeah, buddy. Are we real family? I looked at him in the rearview mirror, at his honest eyes and his discount store shoes, and felt my heart break a little. We're the realest family there is, I said. As we drove away, I saw my sister standing in her driveway, her cream-colored sweater perfect against the backdrop of her 2-story home. The home I'd been paying for. The home she'd have to figure out how to keep without my help. My phone started ringing before we reached the main road. Mom's name flashed on the screen. Then Dad's. Then my brother's. I let them all go to voicemail. The truth wasn't just starting. The truth had been there all along, waiting for someone to speak it out loud. I'd finally found the courage to do it, prompted by the sight of my son touching his new shoes and wondering what made him insufficient. Real family members don't need their brother paying their mortgage. But real family members also don't make children feel less than for circumstances beyond their control. I'd learned that lesson today, and it had cost me $115,000 to figure it out.